Cool. So here we are. So every single thing on the internet is a box, and the CSS box model defines that container, right? So starting with the content, the text that you have, like an H1 or a div or whatever, the thing inside of there is the content, that's the text. And then the next thing is the padding, and then the border is on the outside of the padding, and then the margin is on the outside of that. And you can see that in this abstract browsing piece that I looked at with you all on Monday. And you can also see it if you inspect the source and hover over pieces. You can see how everything fits together. And so you can set all of these in CSS using margin, padding, border. You can set them all in one. Here, this sets all the margins around in 10 pixels. Or you can set them by top, right, bottom, left. That's top, right, bottom, left. So everything, it's always clockwise. And so this is this sets the top, right, bottom, left in pixels. And pixels is a static unit. It won't. It's unlike a relative unit like percentages. It won't change with the size of the browser or the size of the device that the person looks at. And then this is a shorthand. This one means top, bottom, and left, right. So in terms of hiding content, there are several ways to do that. You can use opacity to make it invisible, or like 0.5 will make it semi-opaque. You can also do visibility hidden or displaying none. Each of these have different effects. Some of them will make it so you can't edit the content at all. Others will make it so you can still hide and show them. Like if you go to a page and there's a drop-down menu, that's what they're doing. They're saying, you know, hide and show that. That function right there is display none, display block. Display none, display block. And that's how that works. And that little like box that appears behind the help is based on the hover. So those are all built into CSS, all the effects that you see. Okay, so we talked about the flow a little bit. The flow is that when you start at the top of the page and it slowly adds to the content of the page based on the order it's received. But you know, because we have position, we can change the display position. We can change where these things end up. And so the first thing you need to know is that you can really only have these margin, padding, border controls on a block level element or an inline block element. And so this is what an inline element looks like. The element does, if you have a span, the element does not create a new line. It lives on the same baseline as the text or whatever else is around it, and it wraps tightly around that text. So you can't change the height and width because it's wrapped tightly around the text and you can't control it. A block level element always adds a new line, and you can add a top margin, bottom margin, et cetera, right? If you want margin, width, height, if you want those kind of controls on something that fits on the baseline of something else, for example, like, see these right here? They have some control over the margin. I can zoom in, yeah. They have some control over the left margin, top margin, the rounded corner. See, here's corner radius at work right now. They have some control over that, but at the same time, they fit on the same line. So they probably are, if you right click and inspect, they probably are the display property, which I can get into right here, is probably, there it is, inline block. So, and that class is called Google Inline Block appropriately. And so that's the inline block class, and it allows them to have block level control stuff over on top of the, but at the same time, keep them all in the same line without adding a new line like a regular block level element does. Any questions so far? So here's another kind of visualization of block versus inline. So positioning is the second part of this, and that is that. So there are 4 general types of positioning. And I'm not covering Flex here and Flexbox because we're really just gonna jump ahead to just like learning how to do bootstrap columns, which are Flexbox, but there's a whole suite of controls that we get with those. But we're working on just the kind of like low-level stuff right now. So everything by default is static. That means when you put it in a document, it shows up in the order that you put it in. Its position is, that is. And so a relative position means that you can suddenly use top right, bottom left to adjust the position relative to where it should have started in the first place, which is its parent, right? So this is its parent. And absolute does the exact same thing, but the relative position is relative to the browser window. If you have it absolute, it's going to be relative to its, let me state that again. It's relative to its first non-static parent. And I'll show you in a second what that means. And then fix means you can scroll. So here's an animation showing this. And so these are the first two. They're pretty easy to grasp. It's like a translate, you know. And then absolute, you can see that its position according to the top left corner, the 0, 0, that's the browser window 0, 0 is right there. And it scrolls, whereas a fix does the same thing except it does not scroll. And so yesterday, I think this is like my first version, and then I made this one a few years ago, and then this one I made yesterday. And this one I think is, to me, like the best yet of these. And let me refresh so I know that it's most recent. And so I've got the HTML, CSS. I wrote a JavaScript function so that I can just write whatever CSS I want here. And the JavaScript will automatically grab the CSS that's in there and display it so that I know I'm looking at the most current data. So here we have static, relative, absolute, and fixed. And if you scroll, you can see this in work, right? Okay, so relative means it's relative to its parent. But it also includes, like it says here, the content in the parent. So here we have, this is position relative. I don't have a top on it, I just have left. So it gets bumped down according to the flow, and it shows up right there after this content. And then because I say left -20, it goes to the left -20. This is inside of this one, and this one is inside of this one. So this is the grandchild. So here we say, there's no top again, so it's relative to, vertically it's relative to this, and then there's left 40. And that means it's left 40 of its parent, and its parent was moved over here. So now, even though this is only 20 from the grandparent, it's 40 from the parent because the previous one's moved negative. Here I recreated the exact same layout, except its position absolute. And so you can see, because its first non-static parent is actually this column right here, right? If I come over here and I take out, this is relative, this is absolute, and I come over here and I take the first one and I make it 0, it's going to bump up right here. See that? Because this is where that little column is that I made. However, if you look down here, I put 1 outside of it. This one down here. So this one is 500 pixels from the left and 700 pixels from the top of the 0, 0 point of this page. And the last one, you can see what's happening with fixed. And notice I'm only using top and left in all of these, but here I use right and bottom because I wanted it to sit on the bottom right of the browser. Okay, so any questions so far about block versus inline and positioning? These are the tools you need for this assignment. What's great about this is it's not a screenshot. You just come and look at the code if you'd like to. So there it is. And then the last thing I want to say is about z-index. And nobody, oh no, that's not true. In the morning it was, but I have 2 students in here who know what this means. You remember? Does anybody know what this means? It's 3D, right? Yeah, it's XYZ. And they're pointing in the increasing direction, right? So if you take game development, Unity is a left-handed 3D world. And that means that Y is up, Y is not only up and down, it increases on that on the Y-axis as you go up. And Z increases as you go in. HTML is the opposite. So it's more like that. So it increases as you go. So the higher the Z, the higher it's going to be in the page, right? which is like the UI in Unity. But let's not go into that. Okay, so does that make sense? So it's basically the stacking order, but the Z is closer to you. The higher the Z, the closer to you, the higher it is in the page. I think it's actually a little bit more intuitive. Okay, questions? Questions about anything? All right. So I'm going to stop the video, and we'll just continue working on these projects. I just started grading your, I finally done with the morning class, and now I'm grading the view source for this class. Things are going really great. I just love teaching this class. I love seeing like the difference between your first project and your second project. I love seeing you experiment. You know, like I think it's great. So like dive in, learn things, Google stuff, ask me. Cool, so I'm here. Let me know when you have a question.